You must stay at home. Stay at home.
Hello and welcome to Lockdown, hosted by Steve Bomford with Mike Davis-Marks. Our armed forces operate in challenging environments. Week by week, we'll explore what we can learn from their experiences.
Hi, Steve. Your next guest for the podcast is someone I met in 2009, a Royal Marine called Mark Ormrod, and I bet he's got a fascinating story to tell.
He has got a fascinating story. Obviously, this is someone you know as well. Surprise, surprise for our podcast. But yes, it's going to be well worth a listen.
All right, well, I'm really looking forward to hearing it.
Mark, thank you very much for agreeing to come on the podcast.
My pleasure, mate. Thank you for having me on.
So we've got a lot to talk about because you do an awful lot of stuff, which we'd like to talk about, or I'd like to talk about. But firstly, I'd just like to start with, can you tell me a bit about your time in the Royal Marines, which is kind of where this all starts, this story, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And it was a long time ago, 20 years ago now, so I will give you the condensed version of how it all came about. So I was coming up to the end of school, GCSE, 6 months away, time to make that big decision. Do I go on a further education or do I go out into the big bad world and make something of myself? So after lots of deliberation and conversations with grown-ups, I decided I was going to go out and try and make something of myself. Then came the challenge of deciding, what do you want to do? Anyway, fast forward a couple of weeks, decided that a career in the military was for me. Then when you get into that world, you've got more decisions to make because you've got the RAF, you've got the Navy, you've got the Army, you've got the Royal Marine, you've got all these different branches. Again, another couple of weeks passed, another couple of conversations with some grown-ups, a quick trip to the careers centre, and eventually I decided on a career in the Royal Marines. So finished up at school, applied for the Marines when I was 16, was fortunate enough to be accepted and to start training when I was 17 and finished my training and out my Green Beret when I was 18. So still a young man, still a pup, but have gone through this training. I was fortunate, I didn't get injured. I made it through first time. But at 18 years old, yeah, Green Beret on my head, chest seemed to expand about 6 inches. I grew about 6 inches and just was set out on what I thought was going to be a very exciting and very 22-year plus career in the Marines.
And it didn't quite pan out like that, did it?
It did not quite pan out like that. Now, I finished my training October 2001, which was about 4 or 5 weeks after 9/11.
Yeah.
So I knew that straight out the gate, we were going to be going out there and doing something that we had just trained to do. I was prepared to go to Afghanistan in 2002, did the training that was required, but they scaled it back somewhat, so I never ended up going. Early 2003, when I was 19, I deployed to Iraq on Operation Telic 1. And then I came back from that deployment, settled into unit life, went to Norway, learned to fight in the Arctic, did a few exercises and that kind of stuff. And then my girlfriend at the time was pregnant with my eldest daughter. So I looked at my life and I thought, okay, 5 years, that's my minimum time. I've out my beret, I've been to war, I've done a few other things, ticked a few boxes in that first 5 years. So I decided to leave now that I was going to be a father. Now, like many things in life, the plan did not go to plan. We separated as I was leaving. So I wasn't in the best place to start my life as a civilian. But I decided to roll with the punches. I took all the money that you're entitled to when you leave the military, all the money that I had saved, went to South Africa, retrained as a bodyguard, with the hope that I would then spend a good chunk of my adult life doing what Kevin Costner did in The Bodyguard, looking after glamorous celebrities and living the life. And this is what I thought bodyguarding was. And I very quickly found out, even on the training course, that it was nothing like that.
So popular culture's got a lot to answer for, isn't it?
It's nothing like that at all. You're either living out of a bag in the desert, like many of my friends have done over the last 10, 20 years. You can get that Kevin Costner style life if you're very lucky. But I think a lot of the time you're just walking around getting treated badly for good money, but it's a lot of time away from home, and it's difficult. So anyway, that didn't really work out for me, and I decided to rejoin the Marines in 2007. So I'd only been a civilian for about a year. No need to do the training again, just the regular annual shooting test, fitness test, that kind of stuff. And within 4 weeks of signing the paperwork, I was back in, ready to pick up my career where I left off. The unit I went to, 40 Commando, based in Taunton in the Somerset, were next on the rotation to deploy to Afghanistan. So literally the minute I joined that unit, I was into the pre-deployment training. And September the 7th, 2007, that's what we did. We hit the ground in Afghanistan, ready for a 6-month tour.
And then?
Like most of the things in my life to this point, that didn't go to plan either. Because halfway through that tour, about 3.5 months into it, on Christmas Eve, I was out as second in command of a section of men out on a routine foot patrol. And on the way back into our camp, I stood on and detonated an improvised explosive device, which resulted in me eventually losing both my legs above the knee and my right arm, my dominant arm, above the elbow. So yeah, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. So obviously you survived all of that. Once you kind of got back to the real world, what were you thinking? What was your plan? What were you going to do? Because I mean, I don't know anybody understands a situation like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie. It was difficult. I was 24 years old at the time. I was, prior to the incident, 6'2", 16 stone, at the peak of my physical fitness. Everything that in my mind, I thought a alpha male should be, if you like. And I was living the dream. You know what I mean? I was back in the Marines that I love, traveling around. Now all of a sudden, boom, I think I was 9 stone 2. Without my prosthetic legs on, I'm 4'2". And I'm only 24 years old. So I've got a good, in my mind, 80 years ahead of me.
Yeah.
And in what I thought was going to be life in a wheelchair. So it was difficult to take in, but I had some great support in those early days, which was crucial. The way I was, I'm going to say, looked after was phenomenal, but I think there was a degree of luck thrown in the equation as well, in the fact that I believe when you go through something like this, when you wake up, I was injured on Christmas Eve and I wasn't brought out of the coma back in the UK until the 28th of December. But when you wake up and you start to realize where you are, what's happening, the reality of your situation, there are only 2 ways that you can go.
Right.
One is straight down, and obviously the other one's the opposite. And I'm not saying straight up, but you kind of just look at things and you go, okay, this is what's happened. These are the facts. What are we going to do about it? And I think a little bit of my previous mindset mixed with an amazing amount of support, sprinkled with a bit of luck, was what enabled me to be able to handle that, and deal with that and accept it and figure out a way forward. So, that initial recovery certainly wasn't a smooth ride, but it was made a lot more manageable by a whole number of factors. And, I'm going to say again, a great deal of luck.
So from what I can tell, you've built upon that luck. You've built a house, as it were, upon that luck. I looked on your website and there's a line that struck me here, how you've turned personal tragedy into an ongoing story of personal success. And in terms of just before we started recording this, we talked about your sea swim. We'll come back to that. I mean, how you go from being injured and blown up in a coma and going to that. How did that happen? How did you, you've obviously talked about your mindset, but you still got stuff to do. There's lots to be done. What did you do? What were your next steps, and what motivated you to do that?
That there's what made it even more difficult for me was that I was the first triple amputee from the UK. And I always knew, even from a young age, that if you want to excel at something, then just go find a mentor who you look up to and see what you can do to emulate and copy what they have done. But I didn't have that. Now, initially, I thought that was a disadvantage, but then I found a way to use that as a bit of motivation, because there's something quite exciting about being the first to do something. Do you know what I mean? Especially when people are telling you can't. And I'm not saying it's in this kind of way like, you can't tell me no, I'm going to prove the whole world wrong. But internally, it's kind of like, well, actually, I don't quite believe that. If you that's your opinion, but I reckon we can figure things out. And so, I kind of looked at it as an opportunity for personal growth. Being the first triple amputee, having to come up against all these challenges, not just for me, but for my whole rehab team for the first time that they'd never dealt with, and trying to figure out ways to overcome them. I did actually find a mentor. It took me having to fly to America about a year after my recovery to go and meet him. But I mean, and we can talk about that a bit later if you like, but that was the trip that changed my life. But there are a million different things that added up to what motivated me.
Yeah.
There was my pride in being a Royal Marine. There was my family, my friends, the support network around me. There was the goals that I was setting for myself from an early time. There was this overwhelming, and it took a while to get there, but this overwhelming sense of gratitude eventually. As I started to see more and more men and women come through the system after me that were injured with, arguably, and this is my opinion, worse injuries than I have, you kind of feel grateful for your situation after a while. What you see with me is what you get: 2 legs, 1 arm, couple of scars, a couple of burns, and that's it. I have friends who, on the surface, look less severely injured than me, but they've had parts of their intestines ripped out with shrapnel. They've got traumatic brain injuries. They've got post-traumatic stress disorder. They've got nerve damage. All the things you can't see that I'm fortunate enough not to have to deal with, that they do. So you start to feel grateful then, and then you think, well, all I've really got to do is put in a bunch of hard work in the beginning, get these prosthetics, work through the initial pain, discomfort, and the hard work, and then I can get my life back.
Yeah.
Because I don't have all these other issues that everyone else has to deal with. So then when you put the gratitude in the mix as well, and the fact that I've got the best prosthetics you can get, not some crap that they found in the back of a store. These are nearly £100,000 worth of technology. And that enables me to have my life back. It's a little bit slower, my life, than it used to be, but I've got it back and I'm independent. And, that's something I don't take for granted. So, there's all these reasons to go on and to move forward and to set goals and to want to grow. And, I honestly think, I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit now.
No, you carry on.
I honestly think, and this is just my opinion, that human beings are their happiest and their best when they're growing and when they're moving forward and they're fulfilling their potential. That's, I think, when people are happiest, when they've got a challenge and they're moving towards it and they're working towards it, and then they're seeing progress and they're getting better, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, whatever it is. That's when I think we're happiest. It's definitely when I'm the happiest, and this is a bit of an extreme way to experience personal growth, but these are the cards I was dealt, so you just roll with them.
Yeah. So a lot of our previous guests have talked about this idea of sense of purpose. Is that what you're talking about? You've actually got a reason for doing whatever it is that you do. There's almost like a higher purpose that you have above and beyond just yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, when I was in the Royal Marines, everyone looks at, being a soldier differently. You've got one extreme that think all you do is run around trying to hurt people and, think you're a tough guy. You got the other ones that see the humanitarian side of it. And for me, being in the Royal Marines gave me a purpose. I grew up in the 90s. I was born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s, and I was a big old action movie star, Schwarzenegger, Stallone, and I always wanted to be the big, muscly, capable hero, that gets rid of the bad guys, but will open the door for the lady and pull the seat out and be a gentleman at the same time, right? That's what drove me to the military. But the the sense of purpose that came with it. You know, it is, you got rewind the clock, you know, this is when I was 17 years old. This is, I want to go around the world and I want to stop bad people and I want to help good people. That was my purpose. And then when I got injured, you know, and it takes a while. You've got to go on a personal journey and rediscover what that purpose is. But with the likes of social media, you know, you put up a few clips of you doing this, that, and the other, and complete strangers are telling you how inspiring they find it. And then, you know, you get these DMs from people you've never met, and, you know, really moving DMs about how much just silly, something to me I think was silly, like bum walking around my house, they find it unbelievable and it does something profound and affects them in a positive way. And then you kind of rediscover your purpose. You're like, my purpose now is to live the very best life that I can live and constantly thrive and push towards becoming the ultimate version of myself. First of all, to show everybody that was involved in saving my life that they did the right thing in saving me. And second of all, to try and motivate and inspire as many other people that are watching my content as I can, and show them, you know, you don't need to have all your digits and both arms and both legs to live a fulfilling life. And, you know, hopefully I'm out there showing that on social media and whatever else it is that I'm doing.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I think life throws at challenges at all of us, doesn't it? And it is often how you respond to it, which is never an easy thing. Sometimes, you know, you need support and help, don't you, to be able to get back in the saddle, so to speak.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned the importance of a mentor. I would like to talk about that. This chap in America, he was a triple amputee as well, I believe. Is that right?
He was, yeah. His name's Cameron Clapp, and Cameron was hit by a train when he was 15 back in 2002. And all the things that people were telling me weren't possible back here that I wanted to attempt, I found this guy online and he was doing them. Do you know what I mean? He was living life without a wheelchair. He could drive a car without adaptions. He lived independently on the second floor of an apartment building. He was traveling around America, giving motivational talks to school children. And he didn't have carers or any of this stuff that I was surrounded by. And I thought to myself, that's what I want to do. You know, and so the short version of this is I sent him an email. I told him my story. I introduced myself and asked for some support. He very kindly got back to me about a week later. He then introduced me to his team because, again, support. He had a team behind the scenes who would build his legs, build his arm, program the legs, teach him how to use them. And he introduced me to all of those guys. And they'd been doing it for about 6 years at this point. And by it, I mean rehabbing Cameron and getting him independent. And, you know, I've in neuro-linguistic programming, this is called modeling, right? And it's basically where you take somebody's physical and mental map, if you like, and you copy it. So I took 6 years of their successes and failures when I went over there and condensed it down into 3 weeks to achieve similar results to what Cameron had. And it was amazing. Like that, having that time and that experience with Cameron and his team literally changed my life. It gave me my life back. And, you know, I think, I hope this doesn't sound too arrogant, but I think it's also had a ripple effect on many other people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Even if they don't know the story of when me and Cameron met, because other people have seen, I think, some of the stuff that I do because of what Cameron did for me, and it's helped them. Do you know what I mean? It's a ripple effect.
I think you're absolutely right. I don't think that's immodest of you at all or arrogant. I think you can clearly see that on social media, people talking about it, and the amount of popularity of people talking about what you're doing. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, you just got to have mentors. It's such a powerful thing, and if you can learn from them and learn from their mistakes and from their successes, you can just reach your goals so much quicker.
So you're on the road. You then write a book. Have I got the chronology right here? Or had you written that beforehand?
They kind of went side by side.
Okay.
So in the evenings in rehab, because I've only got one arm and it wasn't even my dominant one, when rehab finished, most of the lads and the girls would go and jump on the PlayStation or the Xbox or whatever it was, and I couldn't do that. because I've only got one hand.
Mm.
So I got pretty bored in the evenings, and there was a bit of kind of media attention around me when I first got hit, because I was the first triple amputee, and I developed a relationship with a journalist. And we were doing a story about, I think it was about in the run up to our wedding, mine and my wife's wedding. And I just said jokingly one evening, we've done so much work together, we could write a book. And he said, well, do you want to? And I'm like, yeah, cool. All right. How do we do this? And he explained to me what a ghostwriter was, which I thought was cool. And so in the evenings, when everyone else was on the PlayStation and the Xbox, we were talking on the phone. I was telling him stories. He was writing them down. He'd send them to me. I'd fact check them and then change the wording a little bit so that obviously it was me saying it. And after about 10 months, we had a book, Man Down. And we were really lucky, actually. In 2009, when the recession hit, the publishers, they only took 3 books on the entire year. Normally they take hundreds. And ours was one of them, so we were pretty lucky in that regard. But yeah, we got it out there, and it's something I never thought I'd get to do.
So you said to me that book was a lot about soldiering when we talked before this. And so you're now writing another book.
I am.
So could you just tell a little bit about that? There's a few other things that I want to talk about as well, but I think, talk about the book, because you said it to me, it's very different than the previous book.
It is. So, the first one was all about life in the Marines, going to war, a little bit about, getting injured and all the stuff that comes along with that. So it's what I like to say is the big, hairy, smelly, macho, alpha male, young part of my story.
Right.
Now, the second one picks up, the first one finishes when I got married, which was the 2nd of May, 2009. My wedding anniversary is actually this weekend. I went to America to meet Cameron in June 2009, so a month after I got married. And that's where this second book picks up, which is I'm not going to say the warm and fluffy, but this is the civilian side of my life. This is the uplifting, fight back, Phoenix rising from the ashes side of it, where I met Cameron, learned from Cameron, and my rehab really accelerated, and I got my life back. So it's a very different book in terms of, I think, inspiration is what I was going for. And yeah, I actually got an email this morning saying it is now the final draft of it is with the literary agent. We're just waiting for the sign off now to get it to the publishers. So lots going on this week, but I'm really excited for that because it's going to hit a different audience. But the great thing is you can't really read the second one without having read the first one first.
Yeah.
So
you look genuinely excited about that. That's really good to see. It really is. So
I am.
Do you have a publishing date, or is this? Do you know an estimated?
No, but I think we will have within the next fortnight or so.
Okay, so keep an eye on your social media.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because as soon as I get any word, it'll be out there.
Cool. So going back a little bit, are you still an ambassador for the Royal Marines charity?
I am. Yeah, I worked for the Royal Marines charity for 10 years, and I decided February this year to leave and go into the entrepreneur space and see if I had what it takes to make it on my own. So, I left 10 years, 10 brilliant years with those guys. It gave me so much more than I think I could ever have hoped for from a job. I didn't want to leave the Marines after I got injured, and this gave me that connection still and that proximity to the Royal Marines. I got to earn a wage and support my family. I got to set loads of personal goals and with their support, go out and achieve them. So it was phenomenal, but I just got to that point. I think we all do it every once in a while where our gut just says, on to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I agreed to stay on as an ambassador, which I'm very proud to do, and still working with them, very regularly.
So you talked earlier about the importance of mentoring. Have you done mentoring? Have you mentored people and given back in that way?
Yes, absolutely. Like I said, that time Cameron and his team gave me, I will never, ever, ever take for granted. I always think about how hard it was in the beginning and how new this whole world was and how many questions I had and no one could answer them, but these guys could. And it, like I said just now, it changed my life. And so I always whenever there's an opportunity, if there is one to mentor people, I'm always, first hand in the air, ready to go out and help out where I can. And I actually myself now go back to America, and there's a boot camp they run every year, like a 4-day boot camp for new guys. I'll go out there if I can and be a mentor to people that are struggling or they're new to being an amputee.
Excellent. I think that's really important, isn't it? Once you've got that experience yourself, that you can pass that on, and you're kind of actually living what it is that you've done, if you see what I mean. That it's important that, with all that experience you've got, to share that with those that need it and will benefit from it.
You have to.
You have to, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So you've just said going into the entrepreneurship, if I said that right, space. Mm-hmm. I assume that you're talking about reorg here. Am I right?
I haven't got enough fingers on my remaining hand to tell you how many things on this. I'm discovering this now, like entrepreneurship, what it means. People used to say to me, well, what are you going to do now? And I would rattle off a list of everything I'm doing, like the book. We've got a movie deal going on. I'm working on some side projects with Amazon. And it just took me about 10 minutes. So I was like, right, I'm an entrepreneur. But reorg is a massive part of that, yeah. I mean, I can tell you the story of how that came about.
Yes, please.
So while I was still serving, I was approached by the founder of reorg, who he's only just left the Marines himself, actually, after 22 years. But when we first met, he was a serving PTI, physical training instructor, and I believe a purple belt at the time in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And we met in the sergeant's mess, and he offered me to go down and do some training. Now, I didn't think I could do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because I didn't really know what it was. I knew what Japanese Jiu-Jitsu was because when I was going through that phase as a teenager, trying all these different martial arts, I had tried traditional Jiu-Jitsu. And I didn't really think I could do that because it was a lot of rolling and throwing. But BJJ was grappling and ground fighting. So I went down and did a session, and I was hooked. Like from the first time I was down, I was hooked because first of all, it was hard work and I was dying by the end of it. But second of all, it was so adaptive. Like there are obviously textbook ways to do things, but everything can be adapted and modified to suit a different person. And I could actually, I went away from that first session thinking, I can work my way through the grades here based on hard work rather than sympathy. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I started to do. And reorg at the time was it was purely Royal Marines. And Sam, the founder, he was a physical training instructor, he was a rehabilitation instructor, and he was a jiu-jitsu practitioner. So he combined the things that he loved, which was fixing men that were broken and jiu-jitsu. And he started using it to help physically and psychologically wounded Royal Marines through their recovery pathway. Now, this gained popularity so quickly that, when they went onto Instagram, the army wanted a piece of it. The RAF wanted a piece of it. So it went tri-service. Then over the time as it grew, the emergency services saw the value in it as well. So we started reaching out to the ambulance and the fire brigade and the police. And, it's just got so big so quick. And last year it became an official charity. And Sam asked me if I wouldn't mind being a trustee, which it was like a dream come true that. And I agreed. And I've just been helping ever since, doing what I can to raise awareness, raise some money, and more importantly, on a selfish note, keep training and keep progressing.
So am I right in thinking that you can compete against able-bodied people doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Have I got that right?
So this was a bit of a wrestling match that I had in my head initially when you say compete. So I train with them, yeah, absolutely. But I did want to compete at a stage. This is another funny story, but I started training for a competition in Manchester and, believe it or not, broke my femur in the process. I got slammed on the end of my leg and it snapped the end of my femur off. So, and then COVID came in. But if I do compete in the future, the answer is no. I don't want to compete against able-bodied people. Well, maybe I will, but when I compete, I want to compete against people that are on a level playing field to me. And the reason for that is I think I don't care who you are. There's a bit of somebody, no matter how hard-ass they are, if they come up against a guy with 3 limbs missing, that's going to hold back. They're not going to go full pelt.
Yep.
And I don't like the pity thing. You know what I mean? But if I'm against somebody who's in a similar situation to me, we can both go hell for leather, and it's going to be whoever's better wins. And then I can hold my head high and never have that doubt in my mind when I go to bed at night thinking, did he go easy on me?
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? So I'd love to compete. And Abu Dhabi have a para jiu-jitsu tournament every April, which I think is about 4 years old now. So it's gaining momentum. But there is the option to go out there and do that with other disabled athletes. Now, I train with able-bodied people because it's always great to have in the back of my mind that confidence that if I was walking through town with my family and some idiot started getting aggressive, that I can do something to protect my family.
Yep.
You know? So yeah, train with them all the time. But I think if I compete, I'm going to do it against similarly, I was going to say disadvantaged, that's not the right word, similarly abled people.
Yeah.
See how I do.
Okay. So as if all that's not enough, there's also a film.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
So this came about. I've got so many stories.
Tell them, Mark. Tell them.
I'm trying to give you the short version of all of these. But Jonathan Ball, who's the chief executive of the Royal Marines charity, reached out to me probably about 3 or 4 years ago now, because I was getting these emails from this couple that I'd never met asking me about making a movie. And I was going through a phase in my life where a lot of people were contacting me and promising me the world and giving me nothing. Mm. So I just started ignoring my emails. I'm like, yeah, okay, I've heard it before. So Jonathan Ball emailed me and said, can you get back to these guys, Mark, that are asking about making a movie with you? Because they're legit. They're for real. This is what they do. So I was like, okay, cool. So I reached out and we had a great conversation. And Lynn and Dave Coleman, they're great supporters of the Royal Marines charity. So we met, we talked the project through, and we all agreed to it. And we actually signed the contracts like 2 weeks before COVID last year, like end of January, start of February last year. And we're all ready to go. And, you know, momentum's high. And then COVID hit. So it kind of tailed off for a bit. But they've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes with the team that we've got, doing all this stuff that you don't see in the movie world. Basically getting all our ducks in a row ready for when we can actually start filming, which is looking likely to be quite soon. So it's basically an amalgamation of book 1 and book 2, right, which is my life, you know, getting injured, but to now. Now, what we're trying to achieve with this, there's a lot of films about war and getting injured and that side of it. There's obviously a little element of that, but we don't want to focus on that. We also all agreed that there's a lot of movies about the outcome of it. So you might get injured, you spend 5 minutes doing the rehab, and then it's all the successes. Yeah. And there will be a little bit of that. But what we want to focus on is the middle bit, the struggle, the roller coaster, the emotion, the literally the parts where I wanted to kill myself, through to the parts where I'm flying and I'm, you know, going off, setting goals and trying to conquer the world. We want to focus on that bit because that's the bit I think the majority of the audience can relate to. I don't mean getting your limbs ripped off, but I mean struggle. Yeah. You know, mental struggle, physical struggle, challenges, obstacles, adversity. Everyone in the world can relate to that because everyone in the world has faced that on a different level. And so that's what we really want to focus on is you know, going that roller coaster of, I've got this challenge in front of me. How do I overcome it? What were the hard bits? You know, and just really take people on a journey. You know, I want people to be, the feedback I get from the first book, people say 1 minute I'm crying because of how tragic it is. And the next minute I'm laughing my ass off. You know, that's what I want people to do with this movie. I want them to leave the theater crying, but just because they're so happy. They've just been on this roller coaster with me and they know the positive outcome, and it just changes their perspective and lifts them up.
So it's kind of about resilience, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And after this past 12 months, there's not a person on the planet that can't say they haven't become more resilient and been through this, you know, and been through a challenge. So that's why it's going to be so appealing, I think.
Could be a movie of its time.
This is the plan. I'm not aiming for something that just goes and does okay. We're aiming for something that just smashes the box offices and is different to anything anyone else has ever seen before, and just grips people's attention and imagination. And I honestly think this past 12 months is what, because of what everyone's been through, it's going to appeal to them because of that.
Yeah.
Because they're all going to be like, okay, I can relate to this a lot more than I could have done 24 months ago.
Exactly. We've all experienced challenges that nobody expected. This is just COVID on top of the challenges you may already have in your life, whatever they may be.
Right.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I'd just like to go back to Reorg because, as you know, we follow you on social media, and recently you did a 5-kilometer run.
I did, yeah.
And now, as if that wasn't, hard enough, you've decided to do a sea swim, and you posted on Instagram a couple of days ago or yesterday saying some of the challenges of doing a sea swim. Would you like to tell me about that? Because you made me laugh when I read this post.
Okay, I will. But first of all, I want to make it very clear that I didn't decide to do any of this. My quote unquote friends that surround me decided that I was going to do this. Well, they suggested it, and then I've got the breaking strain of a wet Kit Kat, and I was like, okay, cool, let's do it.
You don't strike me as the sort of person that's easy to be told what to do, but maybe that's another podcast.
But I think if you challenge me, then I get excited like a dog with a new ball. So yeah, we did the 5K run. That had its own challenges, but now we're going to attempt a 1-kilometer sea swim. Now, obviously I don't have any legs, and I've tried swimming before by kicking my legs, and it does absolutely nothing. I've lost my dominant arm, and even when I do incorporate my what I'll call a stump into swimming, again, it does absolutely nothing except for zap my energy. It does nothing. So the entire thing has to be done using one arm.
Wow.
Right. So, in fact, this is an exclusive, Steve. I've not told anyone this. I've not said it on social media or anything. I've actually applied for a Guinness World Record for this. It takes about 12 weeks for them to come and verify it. But basically, what an able-bodied person would have to do is shackle their ankles together and tie their dominant arm behind their back, or one arm behind their back, which I don't think anyone in the world has ever done. I couldn't find the record, but that's what it is for me. So it's swimming 1 kilometer, with one arm and no aids, nothing else, no flippers, nothing. So you can imagine that can be quite challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine. You're talking to someone that can't swim at all, and I'm able-bodied, so you're off the scale, as usual.
But yesterday, we jumped in the sea for the first training session. And I've swam before. I've swam in a pool before when I was at the Invictus Games. And it's all very difficult. When I swim in a pool, I didn't realize this until I first tried it a couple of years ago. If I don't have air in my lungs, I sink very fast. Very fast. And that never happened when I had legs. So I had to develop techniques, breathing techniques, swimming techniques, race strategies all around that when I was in a pool. And when I got in the ocean yesterday, I knew there were going to be some other challenges that were going to become apparent because of my situation. Now, the good thing was that it's the complete opposite in the sea. I was having a conversation yesterday, and I didn't have to have air in my lungs, and I could float. I could stay buoyant.
Right.
Which was an advantage. The disadvantage, and I'm sure you read all the lessons we learned yesterday, but I got in there with a regular wetsuit on, which just leaked. Like, as soon as I got in, I've got leg stumps and an arm stump, and the water just rushed in there. So I was freezing from the get-go. I decided not to wear a hat or goggles, which was a mistake because it felt like I had a huge headache because of the cold straight away. And because I didn't have goggles on, I couldn't do overarm. I had to do the whole thing breaststroke. We only did a 200-meter swim, but on the first 100 meters out to a buoy, I had a short wetsuit on as well. So my forearm got really cold, started to cramp up, which meant that my fingers couldn't close. They'd stay open, so I couldn't catch the water very well. So I was just trying a bunch of different strokes. I tried swimming on my side a little bit, and I had to fight against the fatigue of my forearm and all that kind of stuff. But it was actually really good because we learned all those lessons on the first day. And so now we're getting a special wetsuit made. I'm going to get a long wetsuit. I'm going to wear a glove so my hand doesn't get cold. I'm going to wear the hat. I'm going to wear the goggles. So
Did your coach tell you to wear those?
He did.
He didn't, did you?
He told me to wear the hat and the goggles, and I'll tell you where my mindset was at. And I don't mind admitting this. I was a little bit nervous. You know, I mean, this isn't a swimming pool. This is the ocean, and there were currents. I haven't swum in the ocean since I was about 13 or 14. So it was basically brand new to me. I had my coach and the guys he brought along were experienced sea swimmers for the safety aspect, which was great. But it just felt a bit overwhelming jumping in the sea for the first time with a wetsuit on, swimming 200 meters, then having a hat on, then having it almost felt like I was going to get weighed down by it all. Mm-hmm. So I was like, no, I'm not doing it. We're just testing it out. I'll go out without it. But again, it was perfect because it showed me that actually I do need a hat. There are advantages to it. I do need the goggles because when my arm started to cramp up, I could have switched to overarm if I had the goggles on. But because I didn't, it wasn't an option because, you've got to get your head under the water. You've got to see where you're going, have your eyes open. So, yeah, I definitely learned a lot of lessons from yesterday. And I'm excited, actually. I was nervous yesterday. I'm excited now to get back in and make those adjustments and see what a difference it makes.
Cool. So when are you planning to do this?
The 21st of May.
Okay. So we can certainly keep our eyes on the Instagram feed, et cetera, to see your training up until that date.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to try and get a couple of sessions in the pool in between just to work on technique where I don't have to worry about anything else but, developing a decent technique. But yeah, I'll be vlogging the whole thing. I've got one vlog in production right now that I go up on my YouTube channel. I'm constantly trying to do live streams just to keep people up to date and push the fundraising up.
So the BBC covering it because they did your run, didn't they?
Yeah, they've been awesome. Do you mind if I quickly just tell the story about how this developed?
Not at all. You please do.
So I said earlier that Reorg became an official charity late last year in October, I think it was. So when I left my job in the Royal Marines charity, I thought to myself, I'm going to have a lot of time on my hands now. So let's get some eyeballs on the Reorg website. Let's get some awareness raised. Let's raise a bit of money. So I had grown this really scruffy beard, my hair, I had the lockdown hair going on. So I thought I'll shave my beard and try and raise £1,000. So I got my youngest daughter, Evelyn, to do it. She was 7. We live streamed it. She's super cute and she's really good on camera. And we did £1,000 in like 32 hours. So this is where I was saying that none of these things are my idea. So Ben, my coach, said, well, why don't we do a run? Maybe if we get to £5,000, you can run 5,000 meters. So I'm like, Ben, do you know how hard that is? I've got no calves, no feet, no knees. None of my quads or hamstrings work. It's all powered by my glutes. He's like, yeah, no, don't worry about it, mate. We got time to train. I'll train you and we'll get your strength and conditioning up. We'll train your glutes and your lower back. I'm like, okay, let's do it. So I then changed the Just Giving page from £1,000 beard shave to a £5,000 run. So we go for the first run. We went to this park. I actually used to hang out there when I grew up, Victoria Park in Plymouth. And there's a great circular route where people walk their dog. And I think it was 1.2K or something, a lap. So Ben was training people outdoors because of the COVID restrictions. So we went down. I met him down there. First day, he wants me to walk, run. So I agreed to it. Again, there's things we got to sort out with my prosthetics. We got to get the alignment sorted out. I hadn't ran for about 3 years to that point. And I get to the end. We're about 200 meters from the finish line. And we had a company down that came to record the whole thing, just out of Red Air Media, just local people that wanted to do us a favor and help us out. So they're filming it all. We get to the end and I'm a little bit fatigued and the tread from my prosthetics, the rubber sole, had worn away. And so carbon fiber hit tarmac and I slipped, hit the deck, did like the front splits, took a huge chunk out the pavement and just landed like a mess. Now we got up, we finished the 200 meters and then I was vlogging that journey as well. So I put it up online and it went viral.
Yeah.
And the BBC got hold of it and all the mainstream media. So they invited me on to do some interviews. And I'm not joking. We did one on Saturday morning. There was about I think there was maybe £3,000 in the kitty at that point. And I sat here on a Saturday morning and did a BBC interview. By the time I'd walked from here to my living room, we had 40 grand.
Wow.
Right. So they invited me on the next day to do another one. And the short version is that after the support that they gave us and the vlogging we were doing and the BBC coverage, it went up to 250 grand by the time the run came around. Now, what was bad about it was I said, when I get to 5 grand, I'll do the 5K run. Well, it went to 5 grand on the first training video that we did. So I literally did 2 training runs and then did a 5K run, like straight out the gate. And it was horrible, because like I said earlier, 5K doesn't sound a long way, but when you hate running to start with, you've got no toes, no feet, no ankles, no knees, no calves, no quads, no hamstrings, nothing to drive with. And my legs are quite short. The longer your legs are, the less energy you use.
Yep.
Like if you got through the knee amputations, it's a lot easier than how high mine are. So you have to build up to these things, but we didn't have the time. And I made a promise that when we got to 5K, I'd do it. So I was just like, right, we got to do this. So we just grizzed it out, literally lap by lap at a running track down in Tavistock in the college. Just grizzed it out, one lap at a time, until we eventually did it. And the BBC live streamed the whole thing. And by the time I'd finished, we had £250,000, which was insane. So then again, not my idea, my coach Ben's idea. What are we going to do next? What are we going to do next? I said, rest. I'm going to rest. He said, oh no, you should try open water sea swimming. It's really, really good for like physical health, mental health, bringing the community together. And I'm like, Ben, I don't like swimming. I like it more than running, but it doesn't mean I like it. And I'm like, okay, right, let's do it. I've seen what he does with his group, 3 boys down in Plymouth, and it's really cool. So yeah, he coerced me into a 1K open water sea swim, which is next on the agenda.
Wow, I don't know what to say to that. That's fantastic, and a huge amount of money. So that has raised the bar for your swim, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's really difficult. Like with a run, I think we got the angle right, and what I mean by angle is explain to people the difficulties of running 5K with my situation. Also, you run with your arms as well, and I only have the one arm to drive with. So we're gonna kind of highlight the difficulties of swimming 1K with one arm, with currents as well, and try and get this. And this sounds like a stretch, but I reckon we could get to 400 grand now, because we never had gift aid before either.
Mm-hmm.
So that £250,000 was completely without gift aid. If we had gift aid, it'd be like another 65 grand on top. So now that we've got gift aid, Reorg have been approved for it, I think we can really push this with the BBC support, with social media leverage, and with the gift aid. We can push this to 400 grand, I reckon.
Well, I wish you every luck. In terms of making it so people understand, when you were talking about having both legs, the world record, and if it was an able-bodied person, it's like having both legs tied together, your stronger arm behind your back and going for a swim. That, for me, immediately made me think that's impossible.
Right.
So I'm not saying that's the answer to your problem, but I think that is a way of explaining it to people. Maybe you should get someone in the water next to you trying to do it. I don't know. But that's what really...
a great idea.
That's what really resonated for me when you were explaining. So obviously I can see you, but I haven't got your lived experience or know the challenges, being a triple amputee brings. But when you put it into such simple terms, okay, that really does explain the level of the challenge, which you couldn't do with legs in the same way, if you see what I mean, because obviously you just couldn't put prosthetics on an able-bodied person, as far as I know. But the swimming, you could almost recreate your circumstances.
I'd say to people sometimes, like, just try for a day, keep your legs, but just take your dominant arm and put it behind your back for a day. Tuck it down the back of your jeans and just look at the challenges of that come just from that problem. Carrying things, holding things, opening the mail, carrying 2 coffee cups and a shopping bag to your car, all these things. Just keep your legs, but just try it without your dominant arm for a day and see the challenges, and then try and multiply that by 10,
So was it Ben that suggested this sea swim to you?
He should just everything.
Right, so he's the one that needs to have his legs tied up and his hand behind his back next to you.
Yeah, but the thing is, he'd probably do it as well.
Well,
He'd probably do it underwater and not even take a breath for the whole time, knowing him.
well, at least that still remains to be proved, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Listen, Mark, that's been absolutely fantastic. We will put loads of details, your social media, your website, anything you want in the description of the podcast so people can find out more. If they want to find out about Reorg, we'll obviously put that link in there. And if you've got a fundraising page for this sea swim, anything, just ping it across to us, and we'll put it in the links. But I'd just like to say again, thank you so much for agreeing to do this podcast. It's been fantastic.
I've had fun, Steve. Thank you, mate.
Mike, I'm a bit lost for words, really. That was an experience, quite humbling. What did you think?
I quite like the fact you're lost for words. That's a positive. But I have to say...
That's a bonus for this podcast. I'm lost for words. You're a lucky boy.
But I have to say, I think I probably agree with you. And that was the most extraordinary interview that you have done to date. And you have interviewed some extraordinary people. But I think this one tops the all. The bar is very, very high.
So we're going to have to dive deeper and deeper into your address book. But yes, I would agree. Quite remarkable.
So as you said, I first met Mark Ormrod 12 years ago or so, 2009, at the Sun Military Awards, which are known as the Millies, where he won the award, the first ever award for fighting with adversity. And boy, was he a worthy winner, as the podcast proved. But I also, before I met him, helped him write his first book. Not actually in terms of the writing bit of it, but in the getting it approved by MBE, because I was then the director of PR for the Royal Navy Royal Marines, and he was a serving Royal Marine. So the ghostwriter, Rob Kennaway, came to me and asked if they could write the book, and I had to go through mod channels and get it approved. And that wasn't that straightforward, if I'm honest, because it was quite a challenging tale, and the MBE wasn't that keen. But I'm glad to say that we prevailed, and the book came out. So I'm really pleased about that.
Yes, I think it's a story worth telling. So if that starts the ball rolling, I think that's well done you for your contribution, however big or small it may be. Well done.
Is that the first well done you've ever given me on this series?
As I said, all these get edited out.
I'm pleased about that. I don't really know where to start. There's so much in that interview to comment on. And, you know, it covers just about everything. His early life as a Marine, leaving because he was going to be a father, then separating at the same time, and then deciding after a year of being the bodyguard, aka Kevin Costner, to rejoin. And then the fated trip tour to Afghanistan in 2007. I mean, I just think every aspect of what he was talking about is extraordinary. But I think very few people will understand quite the mindset and attitude he had in having incurred that injury, what he was going to do about it. He talked about there's two ways of dealing with this, going up or going down, and he clearly chose the up path. But boy, we're talking about Everest here. We're not talking about, a little hill outside on the South Downs. And the attitude and mindset to make all those decisions is phenomenal.
Do you think that's learned, Mike? Do you think that kind of attitude and mindset, it's hard to understand where it comes from unless you've experienced something like that, of course.
Yes, I think it is part learnt, but I also think it's part innate. What makes Mark Ormrod. But the learned bit is probably his Royal Marine training, because the Royal Marines place a lot of emphasis on what they call the state of mind, the mental preparation, the ability to fight through whenever every part of your body is telling you to stop. That sort of resilience that we've talked about before is exemplary, and the Royal Marines do it better than anybody else I know, to be honest.
Well, if Mark Ormrod's anything to go by, who would argue with that?
Yes, but I think he takes it to another level, or several levels. The attitude about not just getting down and getting his life back, but his whole philosophy about, he wanted to have the best life. You know, he was injured at 24, and he saw it as an opportunity to grow. Didn't see it as a barrier to go into sort of a downward spiral. Yeah, and he sees himself as a role model and thanking his recovery team. And he uses the word luck and gratitude a few times. And that blew me away, that somebody who's lost 2 legs and an arm, his dominant arm, considers himself lucky. But I think that's what makes this person so special.
Yeah, he talks a lot about the people around him, doesn't he? And about his mentor, which I'm sure we'll come on to. So I think he's actively sought that support as well and encouraged it. Yeah,
absolutely. He talks about sense of purpose, another recurring theme in our podcast series. And he said, as a Royal Marine, I like this quote. He joined the Royal Marine to stop bad people and help good people. And that's a lovely phrase, I thought. But after his injury, he wanted to live the very best life he could live, considering he could have 60, 70 years ahead of him. He wanted to thank and show his support and recovery team what could be achieved, and he wanted to become a role model and mentor. And I thought, all of that is fantastic sense of purpose, really, really up there.
Yep, I just couldn't agree more.
So then he talked about meeting this US mentor, Cameron Clapp, another triple amputee. He was the first triple amputee from the UK and therefore had no role model and no mentor to turn to. But he discovered this Cameron in the US, who'd 6 years had been triple lost 3 limbs through a train accident, and had learnt an awful lot about how to cope with it. And I think he said in 6 years he condensed it down to 3 weeks, having gone over the States to visit him, and that was a life-changing moment for him.
Wasn't it about this time that he started work on the book? Have I got that right?
Yeah, he said he was doing it in parallel, writing this book with the ghostwriter Rob Kedaway, as well as taking on all of this advice and mentorship from Cameron. And I think at this point he also mentioned that he was now into the final stages of writing a second book. And the first book, Man Down, which I've got a copy of, takes him up to the his early life as a Royal Marine, his injury and recovery from it, up to his marriage. And the second book is now actually what he's done since that point. And it's I guess it's a much more book of all the opportunities that he's grasped, and there have been many. And it will be a book that will resonate with a lot of people who are facing challenges that they can resonate with.
I must admit, the mentor side of what he was talking about I was really struck with, because he made certainly the effort to make a point around that, and it's not something that anybody's discussed with us before, although I'm sure people do have mentors that we've interviewed before. But the idea of a mentor, I think, is interesting.
I think it's very important, and I think you briefly touched on it when you were talking to Bill Oliphant from the RNA about the role that mentors can have in the fellowship that is the Royal Naval Association, and how they can help people who are facing stress at different points of their life, whether it's in service or transitioning from the service into Civvy Street. So I think that this idea of membership is a really valid point and very important for lots of people.
Yeah, I'd agree. Perhaps we should discuss it more with future guests.
Let's do that. He's done a lot since he left the Royal Marines, though, since his injury and recovery from it. In fact, it's almost mind-boggling how much he's done in those 20 years. He worked for the Royal Marines charity for 10 years, and now he's an ambassador for them. He's become an entrepreneur, his words, and he's joined this organisation called Reorg, which is some form of jiu-jitsu and therapy combined, from what I can work out.
It's Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and they've just set up, I don't know, well, they have a venue where they can conduct jiu-jitsu classes down in Plymouth.
Yeah, and he's now been invited to become a trustee of the charity, and it's grown from just Royal Marines to Tri-Service and Blue Lights. Seems to me phenomenal. And I love the point about him not wanting to fight able-bodied people, particularly, in case they take pity on him, because he wants to go at it hell for leather.
Yeah, he said you made a real point, didn't he, about saying it's interesting, that word compete.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that you see his whole DNA is to take on challenges. Later on, he talks about, some of the challenges he's currently doing, the 5K run just done and the 1K sea swim. He seems to I think he likes challenges. He says he's quite weak-willed, but I don't think there's anything weak-willed about Mark Ormrod. I think he's just sees challenges as ability to stretch himself and set further goals.
A puppy with a new ball, I think he said.
Well, I've got one of those. You've met her.
What, a new ball?
No, Pip, the hound engineer. And if that's not enough, he's also making a movie, which is a kind of a combination of books 1 and 2. And he talks about it as being a roller coaster of emotions, of all the things that have affected him, and what he wants is to inspire audience through that roller coaster to come out of it feeling elated, happy, invigorated, inspired, and I bet it does all of that.
Yeah, because although he has achieved a lot, I can't imagine any of this was easy by any stretch of the imagination.
No, there was an interesting challenge he threw down to listeners, anybody. He said, if you really want to understand a little bit of what it's like, he said, forget about your legs, but tie your dominant arm behind your back for a day and see how much you can't do. And that's with legs. So I just, why don't we ask our listeners to have a go at that? Because I suspect many people wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah, I think frustration would take over pretty quickly.
And then, he's now preparing for this 1K sea swim. One arm, no aids. You've got to get the breathing right. He did 200 meters, got cold, but learned everything he does. He learns lessons from and adapts and improves. And I think that's what's so inspiring about him, is he doesn't let anything stop him. He takes what happens as an opportunity to learn from. And I think we can all learn from that, couldn't we?
Yeah, but I don't intend to start up taking sea swims, and I'm meant to be able-bodied, as it were.
But you can't swim.
No, I know.
But he also gave you an exclusive that he was announcing that it was going to be, he's going for the Guinness World Record. And I'm very confident he will be in it.
Yeah, I think that's a certainty.
I have to say, Steve, I think he's one of the most extraordinary, inspiring people you've had on this series, and you've had a lot of very good ones. Hats off to you for of such a brilliant interview.
Thank you very much. I would quite agree. As I said earlier, it was a very humbling experience to sort of hear his stories, how he rose to the challenges, and I think also that as I say, I got a real sense it's far more difficult than than he makes it look by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, Mark Ormrod, thank you. You are extraordinary.
He is indeed. And Mike, perhaps not quite as extraordinary. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for listening. The Royal Navy and Royal Marines charity exists to support sailors, Marines and their families for life. If you or someone you know could do with some support, give them a call on 023 93 87 1568 or drop them an email on support@rnrmc.org.uk. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to hear more, please subscribe.